Senate Bill 519 by Senator Wiener, an act relating to controlled substances.
Senator Wiener, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I rise today to present Senate Bill 519, which will decriminalize the possession and personal use of certain psychedelic substances. To encourage safer use, this bill also decriminalizes drug testing kits and permits the possession of paraphernalia to use these substances in a safe way. SB 519 will also convene an expert working group under the Department of Public Health that will develop recommendations for the legislature about how California can regulate legal access to these substances in a manner that is safe, responsible, and equitable. This approach moves us away from the failed war on drugs, which was based on the badly flawed premise that criminalizing, arresting, prosecuting, and imprisoning people for using drugs will somehow deter their use and will somehow improve public safety. If there's anything we've learned from the past half century, is that throwing people in jail for using drugs doesn't stop drug use. It doesn't stop addiction. It doesn't stop any of the challenges that we have been trying to address with the war on drugs. It has been a complete failure. Colleagues, I'm bringing Senate Bill 519 before you today because we need to change our approach and our response to substance use instead of making it worse. In recent years, various local governments have decriminalized the possession and personal use of psychedelics, including Santa Cruz and Oakland, as well as Washington, D.C., and Somerville, Massachusetts. This past November, Oregon voters passed 2 ballot measures, one that decriminalizes personal use of all substances, and another focused on psilocybin-assisted therapy programs. Other countries, such as Portugal, have also successfully moved in this direction. The bill before you today does not propose to decriminalize all substances. It focuses on psychedelic substances. And colleagues, as those of you who, and I want to thank you for taking the time to look at this bill, there is growing and powerful evidence that psychedelic drugs are extremely helpful and can help save people's lives who are suffering from mental health and addiction challenges. Veterans, parents concerned about their children, people who have PTSD after coming back to this country, after fighting for our country, people who are addicted to heroin, where these substances have changed their lives, have been able to help them stop using drugs. Veterans suffering from PTSD and depression who have been able to turn their lives around. And right now, we are forcing these combat veterans who went to fight for our country, we are forcing them to leave the country to get treatment that will turn their lives around. We should not be doing that. It's shameful. Let's stop arresting and prosecuting people for possessing and using these drugs. Let's take a science and health-based approach instead of a criminalization approach when it comes to drug use. Colleagues, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Senator Melendez.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise in opposition to this bill, and I will tell you as a veteran myself, as someone married to a veteran, and as someone who's had a personal experience with a family member who had suffered from PTSD, I take issue with this bill being propped up as something that's going to help veterans. This bill proposes to legalize a number of drugs. The author mentioned psychedelics, but one in particular that is of great concern to me is ketamine. This bill proposes to make ketamine legal for recreational purposes. Ketamine is a date rape drug. I don't know why in the world we would be contemplating legalizing a drug like ketamine used to incapacitate young women and girls for the purposes of raping them. And keep in mind that 61% roughly of rapes by an acquaintance, perhaps someone at your college, at a party that you attended that you've seen a few times, 61% of those types of rapes are never reported. Roughly half of those done by a boyfriend or someone of that nature are not reported. So someone might suggest that this bill isn't intended to allow activity like that, and I'm sure it's not. But for every one person you may catch using this drug for that specific purpose of raping someone, for every one person you catch doing that, I guarantee you there's at least 10 more you will never catch. Because it's hard to figure out who did that. So now you're going to take a bill and you're going to make having ketamine legal. So you go to any college party or any bar for that matter, and you have it in your pocket. No one can do anything to you. They can ask you what you intend to do with it, and you can say, oh, it's for myself. And then later on, you drop it in someone's drink. A young woman is raped, and she has no idea who did it. That could be your daughter, or your granddaughter, or your niece, or your nephew, frankly. I don't dispute that ketamine has potential. They have been doing trials, but please remember, the ketamine that is being used to treat veterans with PTSD or those with depression is being done in a clinical setting. It is not recreational use. It is typically given either through an IV or through a nasal mist, which is a prescription. It's not a pill. And it is done in a very controlled medical setting in a doctor's office. And it is showing potential. The FDA hasn't approved it. We still don't know. It could prove to be helpful, but not in the way that this bill proposes for it to be used. So I just want you to think about the safety of the young women and girls who may fall victim to someone who takes advantage of a law like this being passed. It doesn't mean that you're against helping people who are suffering from depression, but I think there's a better way we can craft policy to help people like this without also endangering the lives of unsuspecting victims. Thank you, and I ask for your no vote.
Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Madam President. When the senator from San Francisco first asked me about his bill, I said no. I said I didn't think I could support this bill. And then after reading and researching and meeting with the veterans groups that I met with, one in particular stands out. I met with a combat veteran, a Navy SEAL, and an Army Ranger, all who saw things that none of us have seen and none of us probably need to see, did things to make sure that we could live the lives that we choose to live. And I asked them, I said, tell me why this is so important to you. Tell me why this is helping you. And they explained to me that everything that they had tried before, everything that they had been prescribed before, some of them were taking 13 and 14 prescriptive drugs per day, and it wasn't helping. They talked to me about microdosing. They talked to me about how they use this and how it's been life-changing for them and their families. They have started other groups to make sure that our veterans have access to this. So members, I am a creature of habit. Sometimes I hear things and I think, oh no, this isn't the way we've ever done it before. But we know what we're doing to help our veterans is not working. So we need to do something and try something different. And I understand where the senator from Elsinore is coming from. Anyone who knows me in my 7 years that I've been here, I have done a tremendous amount of work on women's issues, specifically around rape. And yes, ketamine has been used as a date rape drug. But I'm not sure if you're all aware that the #1 date rape drug is alcohol. So until we find a way around that, I think that we're going to have that issue as well. And if we want to talk about rape, I think it's a different subject and talking about how we can fix that situation. But members, I would ask you to think a little bit outside your comfort zone. Think about these men and women who have served our country, and this might be a small step in helping them to regain their lives as they have fought to make sure we can live our lives. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Senator Borges.
I think decriminalization is tied to should be tied to the recommendations of persons most knowledgeable. And this bill apparently proposes the creation of a task force. I would feel far more comfortable evaluating the merits of potential decriminalization if there was a task force that had already been formed and put forward their recommendations. So I think this is slightly, the cart before the horse scenario, and I think because of that, we would be better served as a matter of policy and procedure to listen to folks prior to making a decriminalization bill. The second issue I think I have with this is the social sharing. Now, we've heard from folks who are knowledgeable on how this could be beneficial to folks suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. But can't that type of treatment be achieved through controlled substance prescription and not a decriminalization of that? But the idea of social sharing goes against that notion that it should be surgical and targeted to those most needing it. That social sharing component turns this into a recreational decriminalization. So I think for those two reasons, I won't be in a position to support this, and I would encourage the author who does great homework on his bills that maybe something like this come back after a task force is created so we could hear what those professionals are truly recommending rather than doing it in the reverse.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to align myself with the comments of my colleague from Chino. I rise as a proud and I assume seemingly unlikely co-author of SB 519. Based upon my discussions with the author and examination of the most recent research and also consultation with veteran advocates, I've been persuaded that the psychedelic therapies offer potentially breakthrough benefits to California's veterans and others suffering from post-traumatic stress. Psychedelic therapy has recently been demonstrated to be a promising approach for many veterans who have struggled with persistent treatment-resistant challenges caused by battlefield trauma and life-changing injuries. Currently, individuals suffering from post-traumatic stress tend to respond positively to conventional therapies only about 50% of the time, at best, whether that's through psychological counseling or medications or some combination thereof. Half is, of course, better than nothing, but especially for those who have endured trauma in their service to our nation, nearly half is still clearly insufficient. In recent years, veteran suicide rates have steadily risen as the mental health crisis in this country has continued to worsen. At this point, many veterans of our most recent wars have actually lost more of their fellow service members to suicide than to deployments. It's fairly clear at this point that conventional approaches to the mental health treatment of our vets are not satisfactory and require some level of innovation, creativity, and open-mindedness. I'm supporting SB 519 because many of our nation's most accomplished researchers are encouraged as a result of evidence-based research by the potentially beneficial effects of MDMA and other psychotropic substances when combined with structured therapy programs to alleviate the pain and suffering of military veterans and other people who are suffering from the effects of post-traumatic stress. I'm also supporting SB 519 because the bill offers new hope to our military veterans and their families and their friends. As my colleague from San Francisco mentioned, unfortunately, at the moment, access to these promising emerging therapies are currently only legally available outside the United States. This forces military PTS sufferers, many of whom have tried virtually everything and find themselves on the verge of giving up to leave the U.S. and pay for the costs of travel and living abroad in an unfamiliar culture simply to receive aid and comfort that they truly deserve. We in California, as we have consistently done, must continue to provide leadership and innovation in our approaches to providing effective remedies for the men and women who have sacrificed their safety and their well-being in service to the rest of us. I urge you to join me in supporting this legislation. As a veteran and on behalf of California's veterans, I respectfully urge your aye vote today.
Senator Bates.
Thank you, Madam President. I must rise in opposition to this bill out of personal experience of many decades ago when perhaps some of you weren't were maybe not even on the planet yet, but I was a social caseworker and intake supervisor in the 60s and 70s at the time that LSD became the go-to drug for social sharing. I think you might remember the name Timothy Leary, who was considered the guru of being able to take this specific drug, LSD, and find yourself in another world, out-of-body experiences. Well, my caseload at that time contained a number of young people who had tried that experiment through social sharing, I bring forward, and were not able to return to their body or from that other world that they found through that drug. So they became totally incapacitated. My caseload was aid to the disabled at that time, and I had a number of those young people who were practically my age at that time, who basically had no further capacity and found themselves in assisted living or what was available for people of that age at that time. So the social sharing part of this drug is very, very concerning. And I think when you're talking about psychedelic experiences that will go on at parties, social sharing, as compared to a therapeutic use for our veterans, they're quite different and shouldn't, I don't believe, be contained in a measure like this. If we want to confine it, specify it for its therapeutic use with our veterans, I totally support that. But I do believe that this steps way over that in promoting social sharing of these very, very significantly impactful drugs. And you need only go to the science that is available to show what the impacts of psychedelic drugs are on certainly very young minds, and hopefully in terms of those who are suffering PTSD and those particular conditions, it's quite a different experience based on science. So it needs to be separated, and I think most importantly, the cart before the horse here, we should have the results of the task force and the studies that are done before we take this step. So I urge a no vote.
Senator Penn.
Thank you, Madam President, Senators. I rise in support of this bill, SB 519, and this bill was heard in the Health Committee. These are medications that are showing considerable promise, and even more than promise, in helping treat significant mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And because of current law, we actually tell people if you actually have it on you, you are breaking the law, which then forces people to have to leave the country in order to get treatment. I think I think both our veterans or anyone else who suffers from PTSD deserves better and should have access to these medications. And so with that, I urge an aye vote on this bill. Thank you.
Senator Melendez.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have a few more things to add. To say that a particular drug shows promise probably sounds encouraging to many, but is it good policy to make a drug legal for recreational purposes, one that you have decided just shows promise? Is that safe policy to put into place? Veterans right now, if that's really what this bill is about, veterans right now have access to ketamine therapy. What they don't have access to is over-medicating themselves, which we know is common in those who suffer from depression and severe PTSD. This bill would allow them to over-medicate themselves with a drug like this, and I think that's the exact opposite effect that we're looking for. We want those who have severe depression and other trauma to be able to get better. Well, you can't get better if you are over-medicating yourself. This is, again, aside from the point that I made that you are putting young women and young girls at great risk by making a drug like this legal for recreational purposes, not therapeutic purposes, recreational purposes. Again, I ask for your no vote.
Senator Kamlager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of SB 519. And just want to remind folks that, psychedelics have played a role in so many cultures since prehistory. They help those with mental illnesses, with depression, with anxiety, with PTSD, and they've also helped healthy people too. They offer not only therapeutic, but spiritual and creative benefits as well. As the author of this bill mentioned, they were criminalized and in fact used as a political tool. In fact, in 1994, a Nixon aide admitted that the war on drugs was a political tool designed to target blacks and those protesting the Vietnam War, and said that since you could not make being black or being a hippie illegal, then you could make the drugs that they took illegal. As a result, the trials that were going on in the 50s and in the 60s actually stopped because of this manufactured war on drugs. I think this bill is about public health. Research, aggressive research has started back up again, which does show that there is promise for treatment using these drugs. And as we have seen just with last year, I think many of us, or many folks, many Americans actually, put their faith in the promise of a vaccine. That is medication that did not go through what the normal, longer channels of research and testing would require, because they showed enough promise to accelerate. I just want to also add that, rape is illegal. No matter if you are using drugs, some kind of substance, or force. And this is not about decriminalizing errant behavior. It's about decriminalizing the use of certain psychedelics that have been proven to be useful for many folks who need them. And this also should not be about judgment. Oftentimes we want to place our own personal judgment or our own personal experiences onto other folks without really understanding their own mental health, their medical needs, and their ability to have control over their bodies and the medical decisions that they want to be able to make. And I would hope that we would think about this in the space of public health rather than in the space of criminalization, and ask for your support on SB 519.
Seeing no further discussion or debate, Senator Wiener, you may conclude. I'm sorry, Senator Archuleta. I apologize.
Thank you, Madam. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam President. And I hope today, because we just had Memorial Day, I am a veteran. I'm a combat veteran. I've served as the Los Angeles County Commissioner of Military and Veterans Affairs for 24 years. You tell me who's done that. You tell me who sat down with family after family and veteran after veteran and held them, and as they cried, said, what can I possibly do with my son? He's drinking. He's beating his wife. He's doing this. He's doing that. And we've been able to pick up the phone and get the veterans representative, the social workers who work with the VA to set up the appointments and get them into the VA system. And once they got into the VA system, once they went to the East LA Vet Center, well, we've had nothing but success there. God bless those individuals. And so now I know one thing, that my question is, where are they going to get this LSD drug? Are they going to get it in the alley on a Saturday night? Are they going to go down to Pacoima, Compton, Watts? Where are they going to get this drug? But wherever they get it, I'll bet you $2 to a donut, they're going to be getting additional drug. additional drugs. Why? Because they're going to be self-medicating themselves. They don't know one from the other. They're going to experiment. LSD is not a good thing, and if it is, then let's do the research. Let's find out. Let's let the VA do what they need to do to find the research. And right now, this shouldn't be a bill about Republicans and Democrats. This should be about our veterans who served. I've got a son who's got 5 tours in combat. He's been there. He's seen it. I'm a paratrooper. My other son's a paratrooper. 3 of us, 3 paratroopers in the same family. And when we sit down, we talk, and they're as healthy as you and I because they maintain the military way, is meeting with the social workers and the ability to talk to their buddies. So this thing about self-medication, and this is what it is. So I'm asking you, and I'm going to abstain on this bill. And I think if we just wait, what is the hurry? Let's wait on to see what the research. We asked about a task force. Do we have one? Are they moving along? If we came back next year and said, this is the finding, this is the door, fine. But I will tell you this, we can't spare one single life at all because he overdosed. And so I ask you to bear with us and abstain today so we can do more research. And as a veteran, I tell you, and there's a veteran sitting right over there, and there's one here, and there's one there. We've got the Veterans Committee made up of 7 veterans for the first time in our history, and I'm the chair, and I tell you, we're all working for the same thing. And if I personally felt this would help veterans across the board, I would be for it. But it doesn't, not just yet. So let's be patient, and I'd like you to ask to indulge me in giving us a chance and abstain on this vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Dodd.
Yes, Madam President and members, I was not planning on speaking on this. In fact, I've made statements in public that I was never going to vote for this bill. And you know, I had a number of people come to me and talk, and look, it's not about being righteous. It's not about being right or wrong in terms of making this decision. The way it comes down to me at this point in time is we are losing people at great rates in our country that have gone overseas to fight on our behalf. And, we've also lost, so I've talked to a number of service people that had to leave the country to go to Peru, to go to Mexico, to go to Europe, to go to other places, spend more money to be able to do this, to facilitate it. I've also had parents that have called me and said their kids were a lost cause on heroin, et cetera, and got on this drug therapy with the right people. Now, there's no guarantee once this bill leaves that we're going to control every single situation. Certainly, we're not controlling every situation today, and we're losing kids to the war on drugs. Still, we're losing our veterans taking their own lives. So for me, it's a matter of I like the do no harm, but at the end of the day, I think we save way more lives, and we help more families move forward together in these veterans. And I'm going to support this bill. I've had numerous people in terms of contacting me and reaching out, and I was frankly blown away about the number of people that this has really helped in our country. So with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion or debate, for reals this time, Senator Wiener, you may conclude.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I want to thank everyone for the passionate and thoughtful discussion about this bill. These are hard issues. Drugs, mental health, addiction, these are hard issues. And these are issues that we have, frankly, not grappled with as a society. And we have tried superficial, politically expedient solutions that haven't worked. I want to thank the Senator from Napa for raising people who aren't veterans. We have an amazing coalition of veterans, people whose lives have been saved, who have been, sponsoring this bill, have been working their behinds off to move this bill forward because they know this is about saving lives. But it's not just about veterans. Some of you you saw a letter that was submitted by two people by the name of David and Grace. And David and Grace talked about 10 or 15 years ago, their teenage son became addicted to heroin. These are people who have resources. They tried everything that you could possibly try, every treatment, every rehabilitation, every program, everything. It all failed. And he was spiraling towards homelessness and death. That's where he was headed. They sent him, because they have the resources, to Mexico, to an ibogaine program, which is a psychedelic covered by this bill. It's not just about ketamine, despite what the political expedience of focusing on one drug, to an ibogaine program in Mexico. He has not used heroin since. It saved his life. So for David and Grace, or for other parents or family members who want to save their kids or their sisters or their cousin's life, should we tell them, no, you can't do it until the FDA gets around to rescheduling these drugs? That might be in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. Just wait until the FDA takes action. Then you can save his life. Wait for the task force to meet. Once the task force comes back, then you can save his life. I hope he doesn't die before then. People are suffering now, not in 3 or 5 years. They are suffering right now. People are dying now. They are in crisis right now, and COVID has made an awful situation even worse. People are self-medicating now. We need to stop pretending that criminalizing drugs and arresting people somehow stops people from using drugs. That if you only make it a crime to have the drug, people are just going to do what you say and stop using. How has that worked for the last 50 years, where we have incarcerated unending numbers of people for possessing and low-level drug offenses, putting them away for years or decades, nonviolent drug offenders, so that we can get them to stop using? Has that stopped them? Not at all. It's worse now before in terms of drug use. There's more drugs being used now. It has failed. And all we're saying in this bill is let's just stop arresting people. Let's just stop arresting people. Yes, we want the FDA to get around to doing what it needs to do. But we don't know when that's going to happen. Let's do what we can here in California to remove these barriers to people getting the help that they need. Colleagues, I am so grateful for the conversation today, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen? Aye. Archuleta? Atkins? Aye. Bates? No. Becker? Aye. Borges? No. Bradford? Aye. Caballero? Aye. Cortese? Aye. Dally? No. Dodd? Aye. Durazo? Aye. Eggman? Aye. Glazer? No. Gonzalez? Aye. Grove? No. Hertzberg? Hueso? Hurtado? No. Jones? No. Kamlager? Aye. Laird? Aye. Leyva? Aye. Limon? McGuire? Aye. Melendez? No. Min? No. Newman? Aye. Nielsen? No. Ochoa Bogue? No. Pan? Aye. Porcentino? Roth? Aye. Rubio? No. Skinner? Aye. Stern? Umberg? No. Wykowski? Wiener? Aye. Wilk? No.
Please call the absent members.
Archuleta? No. Hertzberg? Hueso? Aye. Limon? Portantino? No. Stern? Wojciechowski? Aye.
Please call the absent members.
Hertzberg? Limon? Stern?
Ayes 21, no 16. The measure passes.